Hello, this is Stephen and Jennifer with Iowa Backyard Farmer coming to you here in early June as our plant sale is just about wrapped up, which allows us to raise the sides on our greenhouses and get our own garden planted. And today we are going to be planting tomatoes.
Yeah, and we do our tomatoes in here on a single string wire vertically. And so we wanted to show you how we do that.
Yep. And we grow them in kind of a non-traditional way in as much as we're trialing about 170 tomatoes this year. So we have to do a lot of them fairly quick. And so just follow us along and we'll talk to you as we go through it.
All right, here we go.
So the first thing we're going to do is pound in these stakes. I got some 2-foot stakes. I've used 1-foot stakes in the past and they've worked just fine. But basically stakes that we can tie our bottom wire to, and follow me as we go do that. Now I know where to put these just because I've done this before. Leave about 3 inches above the soil line so that the wire is floating. We'll come up about 10 feet in our garden, which will have the next one be about here. And then go another roughly 10 feet, and we will put one in here as well. Down below. Done with that part. Now I will put in some screws on the top to wrap the wire around. And since I had just pounded the top of these, do need to drill a kind of a pilot hole to be able to get the screws in. Basically just finding a spot kind of in the middle, and then just screwing this in. About a 1/4 of an inch gap here so that I can wrap the wire around it. So I'll do this for the next 2 as well, and we'll come back and put the wire on. No, maybe too far. There we go. Okay, now let's go put the wire on. So I just have some 17 gauge, just a really lightweight aluminum wire, really easy to bend and easy to maneuver. And basically, we're just going to run this along between all of the screws so that we have something to tie our twine to that goes up to the top wires towards the end of this process. So literally I just come in, give about 2 inches from the end of the wire and just wrap it around here 2 or 3 times. Sometimes I'll wrap it around the main wire. Just want to make sure the end is positioned in a way that it does not stick out and stab me when we come back and do some further work. So I'll just run this on to the next one. Make sure it's good and tight. And then just gonna wrap it around here once, maybe twice. Moving on to the next one. And do the same thing, make sure it's good and tight. And normally, if this was the end of the garden bed, I would just cut this off. But because we have the rest of the garden that we will do later today, I'm just gonna leave the wire roll sitting connected to it. So, the next part is pulling out the measuring tape. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but we plant our tomato plants about 9 inches apart along each side of the wire. So I'll pull out the measuring tape, mark where we need to dig, and we'll take you from there. So there are a lot of different ways to mark where your holes need to be, but I'm going to mark, basically just lay out a measuring tape so I can eyeball it from there. I'll roll this out about 10 feet just to start, then I can pull it on down after that. While most people just use little hand shovels when they're planting their tomatoes with 170 we need to do today. And being that all of ours are in nice quart-sized pots, I'm actually going to use a post hole digger. It is very quick. It's probably the easiest on my back, and so that's what I'm going to do. Most people don't do it this way, but for us, it works really well. And I start by digging the first hole about 4 inches in from the end. And based on the distance, we'll actually end up with the last hole about 4 inches from the end on the other side. Okay, so it didn't take too long to get that first one done. Pull up the measuring tape and actually move it down just a little bit so that the end is centered on that first hole. Should be about there. And then I come on down roughly 9 inches, but then I do it on the other side of my guide wire and do basically the same thing. Come down another 9 inches from there, back on the opposite side. Next up, I'm going to lay out our irrigation PVC pipes. We'll have another video on those at some point in the future, but basically they have a bunch of little holes in them, a couple inches apart, which can help water them. If I lay these down now, I don't have to try to wind it between the plants later. I'm not going to hook those up right now, but it just makes it easier for us to do so later. Next, I'm going to lay out some what we call kind of a pre-plant fertilizer that we make. We'll do another video on that as well. I just want to let you know that I put about a 1/4 cup of it on top of each pile of dirt that I've just dug out. That way when I plant, I can mix it all in and they're good to go. Well, took a little bit of time off to get all the plants pulled out and tried to get them alphabetized. Certainly I've made at least one mistake, but we did pull everything out in the pots, tried to make sure everything has a little sign. And if it doesn't, we'll show you what we do when we don't have a sign but don't want to stop our planting. But got 25 of them all laid out here. And so let's get started. Let's get planting. So I will basically just take my little sign out, put it in a spot that won't be in the way, but not too far away. So the first one I've got is apricot zebra. And since I'm burying these a little bit deep, I go in and I basically just snap off the lower leaves. And for the most part, you can just kind of push up on them and they click right off. I'll pull off any of the little suckers that are down. Basically, I don't want anything that's going to be touching the ground when I'm done. And if I'm questioning it, I'll leave it on, and then later, after when I do the cleanup, we'll come and remove those later. This one is pretty floppy, so I'm gonna take some off pretty high. You may think, oh my goodness, you're taking off too much, but I promise you, this one will be just fine without those leaves. So we did water each of these so that make sure the plant is in a happy spot before we take it out of the pot and get it started. So go ahead and put it down in. Now, I told you I had put some of our pre-plant fertilizer on each of these little piles. I'd said about a 1/4 of a cup or an 1/8 of a cup. Really, it's half what I had initially said, just going by experience. Kind of mix it up just a little bit. And then just go ahead and plant the plant. Make sure that the soil level is kind of level all over the place because of the way that we water. It does help it if it's fairly level. So that is what it looks like after I have done the initial planting. From here, I'm going to do one more and then we'll come back and string those up so I can at least show you an example of what that's going to look like. Be careful I don't snap anything as I'm pulling the next plant out. Next one up is the Big Sun Gold Select. Basically go through the same process. I'll pull the, oh, that one doesn't have a flag. Oops, so I'll have to make sure that we don't lose the container for that. Let's come in, snap either up or down each of the stems that we want to remove. And I think just one more will probably do it here. And this is one where I just pop it up and then pop it down and it comes right off. I will be removing our little stakes that we use when we're growing these. Pull that out and get that out of the way. Kind of squeeze the container, make sure the plant will come out fairly easily. And this one does. If there's a lot of roots, I'll sometimes kind of break these up just a little bit to encourage more growth. If there's not many, then I won't go through that step. Carefully pull the other one we just planted out of the way. Set this one down nicely into the hole. And it's a nice firm plant, so it's going to stand up by itself pretty well. But mix in that pre-plant, and then just go ahead. I'll use my fingers to try to push in the soil down the sides. And pull this other one out of the way just a little bit so you can see it. And this one is standing up pretty nicely on its own. Because I do not have a sign made for it yet, I will take the container, which does have the sign on it. I will grab an extra stick or something to be able to hold it down. I'll just stick this little thing down into it to keep it from blowing away, and we'll come back and put a new sign in, with this one as soon as we are done. Come back and put the sign for the apricot zebra. I just stick it right in front. Makes it really easy for us to connect what plant we are trialing. And that's basically how we do it. I'll go through 25 of these, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how we string them up. So we now have all 25 of our plants planted. I've picked up all of the plant residue. Don't want to keep that stuff around, although we may generate some more here in just a few minutes. But tried to clean it up, tried to make sure we had a flag, or at least a pot that's locked down so that we can bring a flag back and not lose track of what we are growing. And then went and washed my gloves because, being a little OCD, want to make sure that as I'm handling all the plants going forward, I've got cleaner gloves to do that. Don't want to carry any diseases that may have been around. So the next step is we are going to string up all of our indeterminate varieties from the bottom wire up to our trellis here, where we've got a top wire about 7 feet above the bottom wire. And to do that, I use, basically baling twine. 170-pound weight is what we use. We have used 110-pound knot strength in the past. It's just a little bit thinner. When your plants get really heavy, that lighter weight twine can kind of dig into the plants a little bit. I don't know that it really impacted our production at all, but if you have the opportunity to go something like 170 pound strength or higher, go ahead and use that. I think it's better for the plant overall. So we've cut a number of strips of twine into about a 10-foot length. That gives us plenty of flexibility, and we've done it before where we're trying to cut it really close and save up on our twine, and we end up short sometimes towards the end of the season, and don't want to have that happen again, so we just cut them about 10 feet long. So I always start with tying our twine to the bottom wire, and just use kind of a slip knot, and show you how I do that. I bring the twine underneath, give it, 6 or 8 inches, wrap it around on top of the long piece, and then simply push up the little loop, and then pull the long end, and it will look like so. The nice reason for doing that is at the end of the season, or if I make a mistake or need to do something else, I simply have to come pull the short end, and I can pull it right off. And we do the same thing on the top. So I'll do that again. Pull it underneath, pull it over the top of the long part, pull the loop, and then just tighten it up so that we've got a nice little tail that we can pull to loosen it up when we are ready. I then, and you can sometimes do this in advance, I'll wrap the other 10 feet basically around my hand, because especially with big plants like we were doing here in June, it's really a hassle, and can get caught and rip leaves off and stuff if you're not careful when you're trying to just pull a long 10-foot piece of twine around it. So with my rolled up little piece, I take my plant, and I personally always like to go counterclockwise. My wife Jennifer, who is left-handed, likes to go the other direction. So we always laugh that you wrap your plants, I'll wrap my plants. And I'll pull it on around. And we need to make sure that we are wrapping the main stem. And so here's a really good example of where you need to be careful. We've got the main stem here, and here is a sucker. So we don't need that sucker. At the end of the process, we will come back and remove that, because with a single string and a single leader, having suckers like that are not very helpful. When you come up to something like this is a really good example where you look and say, well, is that one the leader or is this one the leader? They're both about the same size. The easiest way to tell which one is the true leader and which one is a sucker is the true leader will have the flower blossoms at a lower spot. So this side actually doesn't have any flower blossoms yet, although you can see some are coming up here. This part is actually a sucker. This one, because of the flower blossoms on it at the lowest point, is actually the true leader. So I will come in and try to, lost my little ball of twine. Not the first time that's happened. And basically just wrap around the rest of it. I am very careful to not touch the flowers because we want to keep the flowers in a good condition. So I'll typically wrap around the bottom of the stem that the flowers are on, and then wrap around above the flowers. And I don't have to go all the way to the top because we will come back about every week, and any new growth, we will wrap that up as well. So I will now tie the top end, very similar to how we did the bottom. And since I've got two wires up here, we will tie the twine to whichever side the plant is on. So in this case, the plant is closer to the edge, so we will tie this one to the wire that is closer to the edge using the same process. We come in, take the string behind, pull it over in front, pull a little loop through, and just tighten it up like that. Now, if it's too loose and wobbly, I may come back and tighten it just a little bit more, which I'll particularly do if it's going to be windy or it's a really heavy plant. That way the plant does not have to put any energy into sustaining its upright structure. The twine will do all of the weight bearing for that. So once we have everything strung up and we're happy with the result, I will then come back and then remove all the suckers that are below basically the top one. I always want to leave the top one in case something happens. And if I was to break off the main leader, I want the top sucker to still be available to continue growth. So in this case, I will just come in and just basically snap off that sucker, and that way we'll continue the growth through just the main leader. Now, if I get through this process and I realize, oh, I've got some leaves that are touching the ground, I really don't want that to be the case. There's a couple things that I can do, or typically will do. If they're really low, I will just come in and then snap them off like I did at the beginning of the planting. Otherwise, if there's a leaf and it's 10 or so inches off the ground, but it drapes and just have a tip that's touching, I'll typically come in, you can either do it with your fingers or with clippers, and just simply clip off the very end so we don't have any part of the plant that is touching the soil. So that's basically the process that we use, and now we'll go ahead and do that with all the rest of these. So now that we have everything strung up, I do want to come back and do one final check to make sure we have everything off the ground and we get all the suckers removed. Now, if the sucker's, 3 or 5 inches long, usually you can snap it off pretty easily with your fingers. And most people I recognize are not planting 3.5 foot tall tomato plants, but we are. And so sometimes those suckers get a little out of control. And so here on the black strawberry is a really good example where we've got a really nice looking main stem that we want to keep as the leader, but we have a sucker here that's like, almost 2 feet tall as well. I would not want to break that one off with my fingers. If I did that, it's likely to tear. And so try to get some little needle nose, little pruners, and come in and just clip that off. If I really wanted another plant, I'd go stick this in some potting mix and you could start a whole nother plant from that. But we don't need to do that today. And so basically that's the process. I will leave the top sucker every time I come out and wrap these up, just because if something was to happen and we lost the leader here, we could then use that sucker there as the next leader. So always try to leave at least one sucker on, but for the most part, just need to come through. Now a lot of these plants will have that. Same thing here again. Nice main leader, very large sucker. Come in, clip that off. Normally I sanitize in between each plant, but just for right now, we will go through and do this same process across everything that still has a main sucker that we need to get removed. Here's another case like that. We've got the V, and we're using this one as the main one. So we'll come in and we'll cut that one out. Also gonna spend some time and cut out all these just little baby suckers. Right down here, you can see where my finger is. There's one that we can just kind of pick out. And as you go on down, you can kind of do the same thing. Got your main leaf, got your sucker that's growing up there. And just pull that on out. I will leave this top one right here, this little sucker, because that's the top one, and if something happens to the top, I'll want that to continue the plant growth. So we'll do that along here for everything that's left, and then we will come back and water in just a minute. Now that we have everything pretty well cleaned up, I will come back, and the last thing we'll do today is give everything a good drink of water and also do a little bit of cleanup. Try not to get the leaves too wet. If there's some dirt on the bottom of the plant from when we were planting it, go ahead and wash that off. And make sure it's certainly enough water to soak down into the roots and the surrounding soil. We got enough good topsoil here that we shouldn't have created any kind of bowl for the water to settle into. It should be able to soak into the surrounding ground just fine. So that's how we plant our giant tomatoes. And I'm curious, what do you do different, or what do you recommend we do different? Would love to hear. Put those down in the comments, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.